You're going to race in that? The Millionaire mock, unaware of what lurked beneath the hood. Sarah Miller felt her heart race as she parked the old blue Beetle amidst dozens of gleaming sports cars. At 28, she never imagined she'd take part in the traditional classic car meet in Aspen, but here she was, sweaty hands gripping the steering wheel of a car that looked like it came straight out of a junkyard. That's when she heard the loud, mocking laugh coming from her right. As she got out of the car, she saw a man about 50 years old, wearing a flawless purple suit, pointing directly at her and her Beetle while speaking loudly to a group of people. "Are you going to race in that?" he asked in a scornful tone, sparking widespread laughter. "Young lady, that thing isn't even fit for the scrapyard anymore." Sarah felt her face burn with embarrassment. Some people stopped to watch the scene, whispering comments she'd rather not hear. The man stepped closer, examining the car with a look of disdain. "Seriously, you intend to take part in the charity race with that thing?" he continued, gesturing dramatically. "Look at this rust, these dents. That's dangerous, girl." "The car is in perfect mechanical condition," Sarah replied, trying to keep her voice steady despite her nerves. "Perfect condition?" He let out another laugh. "Sweetheart, I've been collecting cars for over 30 years. I own a Crimson Sport, an Apex Bull, 3 Zenith 9s. I know quality when I see it. And this here," he tapped lightly on the Beetle's hood, "this here is not quality." An elderly man with white hair who had been watching the argument stepped closer. He seemed about 70 years old and walked with an elegant cane. "Gregory Sterling," he said, extending his hand to Sarah. "I'm one of the event organizers." "Sarah Miller," she replied, shaking his hand harder than she intended. "Mr. Gregory," greeted the man in the purple suit. "Sterling Harrington, it's a pleasure to see you again." "Ah, Sterling, I see you're getting acquainted with our newest participant." Mr. Gregory smiled at Sarah. "She signed up just yesterday for Sunday's race." Sterling's eyes widened. "Wait, she's actually going to participate?" "Mr. Gregory, with all due respect, but that's irresponsible. That car could break down on the track and cause an accident." "The regulations allow cars from any year as long as they pass technical inspection," Mr. Gregory explained calmly. "And Ms. Sarah's Beetle passed all the safety tests." But, Sterling stammered, clearly surprised. "Incidentally," Mr. Gregory continued, "the mechanic who did the inspection was quite impressed with some modifications he found in the engine. Said he had never seen anything like it." Sarah was surprised. Engine modifications? She didn't know of any modifications. The car had belonged to her father, Thomas Miller, who passed away 5 years ago, leaving her with only a small auto shop on the south side of Chicago and this Beetle as an inheritance. "What kind of modifications?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Well, you'll have to find that out from your mechanic," Mr. Gregory winked. "But I can say it sparked quite a bit of technical interest." Sterling still looked incredulous. "Even so, what is a—" He paused, as if he was about to say something offensive. "What is such a young person doing in a serious competition like this?" "Participating just like you, sir," Sarah retorted, feeling anger rise within her. "Unless there's some rule I don't know about regarding age or other characteristics of the participants." "That's not it," Sterling defended himself, but his expression betrayed exactly that prejudice. "It's just that, well, you're going to get hurt. These cars reach high speeds, they require experience. I know how to drive very well, thank you. Driving in traffic is one thing, racing is something completely different." Mr. Gregory intervened diplomatically. "Sterling, why don't we let the race speak for itself? It's a charity competition, let's remember that. The important thing is raising funds for the Children's Hospital." "You're right," Sterling agreed reluctantly. "But don't come whining later that I didn't warn you," he said directly to Sarah. After the men walked away, Sarah stayed by the Beetle, looking at the other cars around. Honestly, the contrast was striking. Crimson red, Crimson Sports gleaming under the sun, flawless Zenith 9s, a few classic cars restored to perfection, and there she was with a faded blue 1978 Beetle, rust on the sides and some scratches on the paint. But why had Mr. Gregory mentioned engine modifications? Her father had never said anything about that. In fact, Thomas rarely talked about his own car. He was always busy fixing customers' cars at the shop. Sarah opened the hood and examined the engine. At first glance, it looked like a regular Beetle engine, but looking closer, she noticed some parts she didn't recognize. Different tubing, a fuel system that didn't seem original, some modifications to the exhaust manifold. Interesting, isn't it? A voice startled her. She turned and saw a man in his 60s, dressed in a blue jumpsuit stained with grease. He had grey hair and calloused hands from decades of mechanical work. "Sorry if I scared you. I'm Arthur Sullivan, the mechanic in charge of tech inspections." "Oh, you're the one who approved my car?" "Exactly. And I have to say, it was one of the most interesting inspections I've done in 40 years on the job." Sarah closed the hood, curious. "Mr. Gregory mentioned you were impressed by some modifications." "Impressed is an understatement. Your daughter, whoever modified this engine, was a mechanical genius." "It wasn't my daughter, it was my father. But I didn't know about these modifications." Arthur looked at her in surprise. "Thomas Miller was your father? You knew him?" "Knew him?" "Kid, Thomas Miller was a legend among mechanics. We worked together for about 5 years in the 90s at a shop specialized in race prep." Sarah's heart raced. Her father had never mentioned working with racing. "He never told me about that. Thomas was very private about his past, but he was the best engine builder I ever knew. He could squeeze power out of any car without sacrificing reliability." "What exactly did he do?" "He prepped cars for amateur races, some professional competitions too. He even had offers to work with famous teams, but he always turned them down. He said he preferred to stay in Chicago, taking care of his family." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now back to the story. Sarah felt like she was discovering a completely different father from the one she had known. Thomas had always been a simple mechanic, owner of a small shop in the neighborhood, fixing everyday cars and never showing any interest in racing. "And this Beetle?" she asked. "Ah, this Beetle is special. Thomas bought it as a personal project. He spent years perfecting the engine, testing different setups. At the time, he said he was building a car for his daughter, for when she grew up." "For me?" "Yeah. He always talked about his little mechanic daughter who played in the shop, who would one day be better than him at fixing engines." Sarah felt her eyes well up. She vaguely remembered playing in the shop as a little girl, her father teaching her the names of tools, explaining how an engine worked. But after her mother passed away, when Sarah was only 8, Thomas became more withdrawn, more focused only on work. "What kind of modifications did he make to the engine?" Arthur looked around, checking if anyone was listening, and leaned in. "I can show you, but it needs to be discreet. Some techniques Thomas developed were, let's just say, too innovative for the time." He asked her to open the hood again and started pointing out different components. "See this injection system? It's not from the factory, nor is it a commercial kit. Thomas designed and built every part. It's like an electronic fuel injection system, but using only mechanical components." "Is that possible?" "For most mechanics, no. But your father had a deep understanding of aerodynamics and fluid mechanics. He calculated everything by hand, built prototypes, tested, adjusted." Arthur continued explaining the modifications: a redesigned intake manifold that optimized airflow, special pistons that increased compression without compromising durability, an exhaust system that eliminated unnecessary restrictions. "With all these modifications, how much horsepower does this engine produce?" Thomas never tested it on a dynamometer for discretion's sake, but in my experience, I'd say it's producing at least double the original power, maybe even more. "Double? But that's impossible. A Beetle produces 60 horsepower at most." "A regular Beetle, yes, but this isn't a regular Beetle. This is Thomas Miller's legacy." Sarah slowly closed the hood, processing all that information. If Arthur was right, her car could truly compete on equal footing with much newer and more expensive cars. "Why did my father never tell me any of this?" "Thomas was a complex man," Arthur sighed. "After his wife passed, he changed a lot. He stopped working with racing, isolated himself in his shop, but he never stopped working on this Beetle. It was like his life's project, and he never got to test it in a race. Not that I know of. Actually, the last time we talked, about 6 years ago, he said the car was finally ready. But then, well, you know what happened. Yes, she knew. 5 years ago, Thomas had left on a trip and never returned. He only left a letter saying he needed to sort out personal matters and that the shop was now hers. Sarah never heard from him again. "Mr. Arthur, can I ask a personal question?" "Sure." "Do you know why my father left?" Arthur was silent for a few seconds, clearly uncomfortable with the question. "Sarah, your father was dealing with health issues, serious issues." "What kind of issues?" "It's not my place to share details he wanted to keep secret, but I can say that Thomas left because he didn't want you to see him. Well, he didn't want you to suffer watching him get worse. He was sick, very sick, and too proud to accept help or pity from anyone, including his own daughter." Sarah felt the world spinning around her. For 5 years she believed her father had abandoned her, that he didn't care enough to even get in touch. Finding out he left to spare her from suffering changed everything. Is he still... "I don't know, dear. Thomas said he was going to rural Kentucky, that he had some relatives there, but I never heard from him again." The rest of the afternoon passed in a whirlwind of emotions. Sarah talked with other participants at the event, some friendly, others skeptical about her chances in the race. Sterling Harrington walked by her a few times, always accompanied by groups of people to whom he clearly repeated disparaging comments about the girls' junk heap. Around 6 in the evening, when the event was winding down, Sarah decided to leave. "I needed to get back to Chicago, to the shop, and digest everything I had discovered." On the way back, the Beetle purred softly on the road. She paid attention to the engine sound for the first time in years. There really was something different there. The engine sounded more refined, more powerful than a regular Beetle. Upon arriving at the shop, she parked the car and sat in the driver's seat for a few minutes, looking at the place that had been her father's world. Miller's Auto Shop occupied a small warehouse on a residential street in the South Side. 3 hydraulic lifts, workbenches with organized tools, some spare parts on the shelves. Nothing too fancy, but clean and functional. Sarah had inherited not just the shop, but also the loyal customer base that Thomas had built over the years. They were simple people who trusted in honest work and fair pricing. She had tried to maintain the same standard of quality, but had always felt like just a competent replacement, never the brilliant mechanic her father had been. Now, discovering that Thomas had been a legend in race car preparation made her question everything she thought she knew about him and about herself. That night, Sarah went through every paper and belonging her father had left at the shop. In his desk drawer, she found some documents she had never examined closely. Certificates from advanced technical courses, some old photos of him next to race cars, and a sealed manila envelope with her name handwritten on it. With shaking hands, she opened the envelope. Inside were several sheets with detailed technical diagrams, engineering calculations, and specifications of the modifications made to the Beetle. On the first page, a handwritten letter. "My dear Sarah, if you're reading this, it means you've finally discovered the secret of the Blue Beetle. I apologize for never telling you about my past in the racing world. When your mother left, I decided I wanted to be just your father, not the famous mechanic people knew. But this car was always for you. Every modification, every improvement was thought of with the day in mind when you would be ready to show the world that a woman can be just as good as any man in mechanics. All the specifications are detailed in the following pages. The engine can produce up to 140 horsepower if you correctly follow the final adjustments I've left noted. But remember, power without control is dangerous. Train, practice, respect the car. If someday you decide to enter a race, know that you have my support, even if I'm not physically here. You have talent, daughter, more talent than I ever had. The racing world can be cruel to people like us, simple people, who weren't born with a silver spoon. But if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that skill and determination trump money and status. Make them eat their words, my daughter. With all my love, Dad. Sarah read the letter 3 times before she could stop crying. Her father hadn't abandoned her. He had left out of love to spare her from suffering, but he had left the greatest gift he could give, a chance to prove her worth. Over the next 2 days, she thoroughly studied every technical specification her father had left. The diagrams showed a level of sophistication she hadn't imagined possible in such an old car. Thomas had designed a preparation system that could be applied to any Volkswagen air-cooled engine, but had kept the secret just for her. On Friday, she decided to make the final adjustments suggested in the documentation. She worked late, calibrating the fuel injection, adjusting the ignition, checking the turbo pressure that had been installed so discreetly that even she hadn't noticed. When she started the engine for the first time after the adjustments, the difference was shocking. The sound had completely changed. Now it sounded like a race engine, powerful but controlled. She took a few laps around the block and felt the brutal strength the car had gained. On Saturday morning, she loaded the Beetle onto a borrowed trailer and set off again for Aspen. The race would take place on Sunday, but participants needed to arrive a day early for final preparations and the safety briefing. When she reached the event location, she realized that news about the girl with the rusty Beetle had spread. Several people watched her with curiosity, some with sympathy, others with obvious skepticism. Sterling Harrington was near the pit area, talking with a group of older men. When he saw Sarah, he made a point of speaking loud enough for her to hear. Poor girl. Someone should convince her to give up before she gets hurt, or even more embarrassed. Sterling, said one of the men in the group, aren't you being a bit too harsh? The young lady has a right to try. She has the right, but that doesn't mean it's sensible. Look at that car. It's literally falling apart. Sarah pretended not to hear and focused on setting up her space in the pit that had been assigned to her. It was one of the smallest, at the end of the line, but she didn't mind. She had work to do. During the afternoon, she attended the mandatory track safety briefing. The circuit was a temporary setup made in a rural area on the outskirts of town, stretching 3.2 kilometers, with long straights, tight curves, and some challenging elevation changes. The maximum speed allowed on the straights is 180 kilometers per hour, the instructor explained. Cars that exceed this speed will be penalized. The race will last 2 hours, with mandatory pit stops for refueling and tire changes. Sarah took careful notes. She had never been in a race, but she had watched many on TV and read a lot about racing strategies over the past few days. After the briefing, she went back to the pit for final car checks. That was when Arthur showed up again. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Nervous," she admitted. "But excited too. That's natural. The first race always brings anxiety. Mr. Arthur, can I ask a technical question?" "Sure." "My father left specifications for final engine adjustments. I managed to implement everything, and the car is now much more powerful, but I'm worried about whether it'll hold up for 2 hours of racing." Arthur quickly examined the engine and smiled. Thomas always designed with durability in mind. If he said the engine can handle it, you can trust him. But tell me, what kind of power are you getting now? "I haven't tested it on a dyno, but from the feel, I'd say it's close to the 140 horsepower he mentioned in the letter." 140 horsepower? Arthur whistled in admiration. That's more than many modern sports cars, especially considering the Beetle's low weight. "Do you think I have a real chance to compete?" "Kid, with that power and a competent driver, you could surprise a lot of people. The question is, can you actually drive?" "I can drive well, but I've never raced on a track." "Driving on the street and racing on a track are completely different things. But," he thought for a moment, "if you want, I can give you some basic tips tonight." "You would do that?" "For Thomas Miller, I'd do anything." That night, Arthur took her to an isolated area of the circuit and spent 2 hours teaching basic sports driving techniques. How to approach corners, when to accelerate and when to brake, how to use the car's weight to improve grip, how to save fuel without losing much performance. The Beetle has a unique characteristic, he explained as she practiced. The rear engine gives a lot of grip to the drive wheels, but it can cause oversteer if you're not careful. If the rear starts to slip on a curve, don't try to correct it abruptly. Let the car settle itself. Sarah absorbed every tip with total concentration. She felt she was learning in 2 hours what would normally take months to acquire. "One last thing," Arthur said when they finished the session. "Don't let the other drivers intimidate you. Some will try to provoke you, throw you off your game. Remember, you have nothing to lose and everything to gain." On Sunday morning, Sarah woke up at 5 o'clock. The race would start at 9, but she wanted to arrive early to do the final checks and mentally prepare for the challenge. When she got to the track, she found intense activity, dozens of cars being prepped, mechanics running back and forth, the sound of engines warming up echoing everywhere. She opened the hood of the Beetle and checked all the fluids, tire pressure, and electrical system operation. Everything seemed perfect. "Ready for a public humiliation?" a familiar voice asked from behind her. It was Sterling, now wearing a professional racing suit, all red with sponsors plastered all over it. "Good morning to you too," she replied without turning around. "Look, girl, it's nothing personal, but you're going to embarrass yourself out there on the track. Why don't you give up now and avoid the shame?" "Because," she turned to face him, "I'm not the type to give up easily." "Fine, but don't say I didn't warn you." Sterling walked away, shaking his head with disdain. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to hit like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us beginners. Now, continuing. At 8:30, all the drivers gathered for the final briefing. There were 22 cars entered in the race, from Crimson Sports and Apex Bulls to some classic American cars like the Phoenix 70 and the Outlaw 74. Sarah's Beetle was undoubtedly the most modest of the group. The start would be a grid based on a preliminary ranking according to the car's value and theoretical performance. Sarah would start in last place. "Don't worry about the starting position," Arthur said, showing up to support her. "In a 2-hour race, the start matters very little." At 9 o'clock sharp, the 22 cars lined up on the track. The morning sun lit up a spectacular scene. Gleaming machines, focused drivers, hundreds of spectators in the makeshift bleachers. Sterling started in second place behind the wheel of a red Crimson Sport worth more than Sarah's entire workshop. The starting flag was dropped, and immediately the deafening roar of engines filled the air. The cars up front shot off, leaving behind a cloud of dust and exhaust fumes. Sarah accelerated carefully, feeling the brutal power of the engine modified by her father. On the first curve, she managed to pass 3 cars that had started ahead of her. On the second curve, 2 more. "My God," she murmured, realizing the Beetle was truly competing on equal footing with far superior cars. On the first long straight of the circuit, she floored it. The Beetle literally flew, overtaking a Thunder Muscle and tailing the rear of a classic Zenith 9. The Zenith 9 driver, surprised to see a rusty Beetle in his mirrors, made a mistake on the next curve and left enough room for Sarah to squeeze through on the inside. Within 15 minutes of the race, she had climbed from 22nd place to 12th. And most impressively, the car was running perfectly with no signs of overheating or mechanical problems. In the stands, people began to notice the Beetle's unexpected performance. "What car is that?" a woman asked her husband. "It's a Beetle, honey. One of those old ones. But how is it passing all those expensive cars?" Arthur, who was watching the race from beside the pit lane, smiled proudly. Thomas Miller had created an engineering masterpiece, and now it was finally showing its potential. On the 20th lap, Sarah was already in 8th place. Ahead of her were only truly sophisticated cars, 2 Crimson Sports, an Apex Bull, 2 Zenith 9s, an Aston Martin, and a Falcon F1. Sterling, who was leading the race in his Crimson Sport, began to notice the Blue Beetle approaching in his rearview mirror. At first, he didn't think much of it. But when he saw that the car was consistently gaining positions, his skepticism gave way to concern. "That's not possible," he muttered to himself. On the 30th lap, the unthinkable happened. Sarah overtook the Aston Martin and claimed 7th place. The maneuver was executed on the outside of a tight curve with a precision that impressed even the most experienced drivers. The crowd in the stands started openly cheering for the Beetle. It was the classic underdog story, challenging the favorites. "Go, girl," some spectators shouted. "Show those rich boys how it's done." Mr. Gregory, watching the race from the control tower, was stunned. "In 40 years of organizing races, I've never seen anything like it," he commented to his assistants. When the first mandatory pit stop for refueling came on the 50th lap, Sarah was in 6th place. She pulled into the pits with her heart racing from adrenaline. "How's the car?" Arthur asked as she jumped out for the quick driver change, a mandatory procedure to extend the stop. "Perfect," she yelled over the noise of the other engines. "No overheating, no vibrations, nothing." "And the fuel? It's consuming less than I expected. I can handle the next stage without any issues." In 2 minutes and 40 seconds, she was back on the track. She had lost 2 positions during the stop, but she knew she could recover them. Sterling had also made his mandatory stop and continued leading the race, but his state of mind had completely changed. The girl in the rusty Beetle was actually threatening his victory, and that was unacceptable. After the restart, Sarah immediately began pressuring the driver ahead of her, a golden Falcon F1. The English car was technically superior, but the Beetle made up for it with agility in the turns and surprising acceleration out of them. On the 65th lap, she managed the pass with a late break that left the Falcon F1 driver furious. Now she was in 5th place, with only 4 cars ahead of her. The 4th-place driver was a Zenith 9 piloted by a man in his 50s, who clearly wasn't going to make it easy for a rookie. He started using aggressive defensive tactics, blocking all of Sarah's attempts to overtake. For 15 laps, the two waged an intense battle. The Zenith 9 had superior power on the straights, but the Beetle was more agile in the corners. It was a clash of titans that electrified the crowd. On the 80th lap, the Zenith 9 driver made a crucial mistake. He braked too early for a turn, and Sarah seized the opportunity to attack on the inside. The overtake was perfect, putting her in 4th place. Now, ahead of her, only the 3rd-place car, a green Apex Bull, the 2nd-place car, another Crimson Sport, and Sterling in the lead remained. The green Apex Bull was having overheating issues and didn't put up much resistance. Within 5 laps, Sarah was in 3rd place. The 2nd-place driver, a black Crimson Sport piloted by a young man, noticed the Beetle approaching and picked up the pace. For several laps, the two maintained a steady gap, but gradually, Sarah began to close the distance. The engine built by her father was running with impressive efficiency, sustaining maximum power without any signs of fatigue. On the 100th lap, she was glued to the rear of the black Crimson Sport. The driver, nervous from the pressure, began making small mistakes that Sarah took advantage of to stay close. On the main straight at lap 105, the magical moment happened. The Beetle passed the Crimson Sport and took over 2nd place in the race. The crowd burst into applause. It was a historic scene, a rusty 1978 Beetle driven by a young mechanic in 2nd place in a race with cars that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Sterling, who was watching her approach in his rearview mirror, felt his blood boil. It wasn't possible that he was being overtaken by that girl with that old heap. He pushed his pace to the max, forcing his Crimson Sport beyond safe limits. For a few laps, he managed to keep his distance from Sarah, but the Beetle kept inexorably closing in. At lap 110, they were separated by only 2 seconds. That's when something unexpected happened. Sterling's Crimson Sport started overheating. A small flaw in the cooling system, caused by the excessive strain he was putting on the engine. Sarah noticed that the car ahead was losing power. On lap 112, on a long straight, she floored it and pulled up alongside the Crimson Sport. The two cars raced side by side at over 100 miles per hour. Sterling looked in his side mirror and saw Sarah's determined face, completely focused on her driving. At the next turn, she completed the pass and took the lead of the race. The crowd in the stands went wild. People were screaming, jumping, crying with emotion. It was the triumph of David over Goliath, of determination over prejudice, of talent over money. Sterling, now in second place and with his car showing increasing problems, couldn't accept what was happening. He decided to attempt a desperate pass at the next opportunity. On lap 115, he tried to overtake Sarah on the inside of a tight turn. It was a risky move, almost suicidal. The two cars lightly touched, but both managed to keep control. "This man is going to cause an accident," Sarah murmured, noticing Sterling's unnecessary aggressiveness. Over the next few laps, she focused on keeping a clean and consistent driving style. The Beetle was running perfectly, and she felt she could maintain the pace until the end of the race. Sterling, on the other hand, was pushing his Crimson Sport too hard. The overheating got worse with every lap, and he knew he would soon have to slow down or risk a terminal engine failure. On lap 120, just 15 minutes from the end of the race, Sterling's Crimson Sport started blowing white smoke from the exhaust. The engine was clearly struggling. Sarah, watching the situation in her rearview mirror, felt a mix of relief and pity. Relief because her victory was becoming more likely. Pity because she saw a man destroying a magnificent car out of pure, wounded pride. With 5 minutes to go in the race, Sterling was forced to pit to check the problems with the Crimson Sport. The engine had overheated so badly that it would be dangerous to continue. Sarah crossed the finish line in first place, followed by the driver of the black Crimson Sport in second and the driver of the green Apex Bull in third. When she stopped the Beetle and took off her helmet, she was trembling with emotion. She had won. A 28-year-old young mechanic, the daughter of a simple mechanic, had defeated some of the most expensive and sophisticated cars in the country. People ran over to congratulate her. Arthur was the first to arrive, with tears in his eyes. "Thomas would be so proud," he said, hugging her tightly. "Mr." Gregory appeared next, smiling broadly. "In 40 years of organizing races, this was the most thrilling one I've ever witnessed. Congratulations, champion." The trophy was handed over in a simple but emotional ceremony. Sarah, still wearing her grease-stained overalls, held the golden trophy as the audience applauded enthusiastically. Sterling Harrington appeared during the award ceremony. His face was red with shame and anger, clearly embarrassed by the situation. "Congratulations," he said dryly to Sarah. "Thank you," she replied politely. That Beetle, how did you get that power out of it?" "The work of a very talented mechanic." "May I ask who?" "Thomas Miller, my father." Sterling went pale upon hearing the name. "Thomas Miller, the Thomas who worked at Berto's garage back in the 90s. "You knew him?" "Knew him?" "He was the best mechanic I ever worked with. He prepared my first race cars over 20 years ago." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "You worked with my father?" "I did, and I learned a lot. Thomas was a mechanical genius, but one day he just vanished from the racing world. I never knew why. My mother had passed away. He decided to dedicate himself entirely to raising me." Sterling lowered his head, clearly ashamed of his attitude throughout the week. I apologize for the way I behaved. If I had known you were Thomas's daughter—" "It shouldn't make a difference who my father is," Sarah interrupted him. "You judged me by the look of my car and by my age. That was wrong, regardless of who my father was." "You're right. I was prejudiced and arrogant. I'm sorry." Sarah looked at him for a few seconds before answering. "I accept your apology, but I hope you learn from this." "I have, believe me, I have." For the rest of the afternoon, Sarah was surrounded by local journalists interested in the story of the unlikely victory. She told them about the garage she inherited from her father, about the secret modifications to the Beetle, about discovering Thomas's past in the racing world. "What's your next step?" asked a reporter. "Do you plan to keep racing?" "Honestly, I don't know. This was my first race. I need to go back to Chicago, to my shop, and think about all of this." "And the prize money? That's $2,000 for the win." Sarah had completely forgotten about the financial prize. $2,000 would make a huge difference in her life, allowing her to buy new equipment for the shop and pay off some outstanding debts. "The money will be very welcome," she admitted. "But the truth is, what I gained today is priceless. The certainty that my father cared about me and left me the greatest gift I could ever imagine." On Monday morning, Sarah returned to Chicago with the Beetle on a trailer, the trophy on the passenger seat, and her heart full of conflicting emotions. On one hand, she was elated with the victory and proud to have honored her father's memory. On the other, she felt lost about what to do with this new reality. Miller's auto shop was waiting for her with a pile of cars to fix and bills to pay. Normal life had to go on. But things changed quickly. The story of the victory spread on social media and reached some Chicago newspapers. Sarah began receiving calls from people interested in preparing cars for racing, something completely new for her. On Tuesday, she received an unexpected visit. Sterling Harrington was at the shop door. "May I come in?" he asked, seeming genuinely embarrassed. "Of course. Come in." Sterling looked around the shop with an expert eye. It was simple but extremely organized. The tools were impeccably arranged, the workbenches clean, everything showing professionalism. "It's exactly how I remember your father's shop," he commented. "You've been here before?" "A few times over 20 years ago. Thomas did some private work for me when I was starting out in the racing world." Edward explained that he was there to make an offer. "I'm putting together a team for the State Touring Car Championship. Modified national cars like the Swift Hatch, Breeze, Spark. I'd like you to be our driver and builder." "Me?" Sarah was surprised. "You've shown exceptional driving skill, and from what I saw of your Beetle, you're also a top-notch builder. That's exactly what I need. But I have my shop to take care of." The team would pay a fixed salary of $8,000 a month, plus bonuses for wins. You could hire someone to help at the shop. It was a tempting offer, but Sarah needed time to think. "Can I give you an answer next week?" "Sure, but don't take too long. The championship starts in 2 months." After Edward left, Sarah was alone in the shop, weighing the decision. Racing professionally was a whole new world, full of challenges and opportunities, but also risks and pressures. That night, she looked over all the documents her father had left again. Besides the Beetle's specs, she found notes on other build projects, ideas he never had a chance to implement. One folder caught her eye: Swift Hatch Turbo Project. Inside were detailed diagrams for turning an ordinary Swift Hatch into a race car, using techniques similar to those applied to the Beetle. Thomas had thought of everything. He'd left not just a prepared car, but a whole set of technical knowledge that could be applied to other vehicles. On Wednesday, Sarah decided to test one of her father's builds. She bought a used 1995 Swift Hatch with a 1.6-liter engine and began implementing the modifications specified in the documents. The work took 2 weeks, but the result was impressive. The Swift Hatch, which originally produced about 95 horsepower, was now generating over 150 horsepower, maintaining reliability and drivability. She tested the car on a private track outside Chicago and was amazed by the performance. Thomas's preparation techniques worked perfectly on different engines. That's when she made her decision. She would accept Edward's offer, but with one condition. She would be not only the driver, but also the technical manager for preparing all the team's cars. Edward agreed immediately. He knew he was hiring not just a talented driver, but also a builder with unique knowledge. The first race of the championship would be in Indianapolis, the most famous track in the country. Sarah would go from a charity race in the countryside to the cathedral of American motorsport in just 2 months. The preparation period was intense. Edward invested in a professional setup, specialized trailer, telemetry equipment, racing tires, everything needed to compete at a high level. Sarah prepared 3 Swift Hatch cars using her father's techniques, one for dry races, one for wet races, and a spare. Each vehicle was meticulously tuned to extract maximum performance. 2 weeks before the first race, she received another unexpected visit at the shop. It was Arthur, the veteran mechanic who had helped her in Aspen. "I heard you became a professional driver," he said, smiling. "Yeah, things have changed a lot since that race. I came to ask you something. Do you need an experienced mechanic on the team?" Sarah was surprised and happy at the same time. "Would you leave your current job to work with us?" "Young lady, I'm 62 years old and I'm tired of fixing family cars. I want to end my career doing what I love most, building cars for racing." "But I don't know if Edward would agree to hire someone else." "Actually," a voice behind her said, "I'd love to have Arthur on the team." It was Sterling, who had arrived without her noticing. "Arthur Sullivan is a legend among race mechanics," Sterling continued. "It would be an honor to have him with us." And so the team was formed. Sterling as owner and manager, Sarah as driver and head tuner, and Arthur as chief mechanic. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, feel free to hit like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us beginners. Now, continuing. The first race in Indianapolis was a trial by fire. There were 35 cars entered, all driven by seasoned professionals. Sarah was the only woman on the grid, which naturally drew extra attention from the media and rivals. During qualifying practice, the swift hatch she had prepared showed its competitiveness. She managed the 12th fastest time in a session featuring some of the best drivers in the country. "Not bad at all for a rookie," Arthur commented as they reviewed the telemetry data. "But I can do better," Sarah said. "The car has the potential to break into the top 10. "Watch out for anxiety," Sterling advised. "It's better to finish your first race in 12th place than to drop out trying to be a hero." The race took place on a sunny Sunday. 20,000 people in the grandstands, live television broadcast, all the pomp of professional motorsport. Sarah started in 12th place and adopted a conservative strategy in the early laps. She observed the rivals' behavior, studied the different racing lines, and adapted to the intense pace of the competition. On the 10th lap, she began to attack. The swift hatch responded perfectly to her commands, and she pulled off some clean overtakes that moved her up to 8th place. On the 20th lap, a crash between two cars at the front of the pack changed the race's dynamics. During the safety car period, Sarah took the chance to pit for an early strategic stop. When the race resumed, she was in 5th position with fresh tires, while most of her rivals still needed to make their mandatory refueling stops. Over the final 15 laps, she managed to hold on to 5th place until the end, scoring her first points in the professional championship. "5th place in her first professional race," Sterling said during the post-race interview, "an excellent result for a rookie team." "How does it feel to race against the best in the country?" a journalist asked Sarah. "Honored to be here and determined to improve with every race. My father taught me that talent without hard work gets you nowhere." The following races confirmed the team's potential. Sarah finished 4th in Washington, D.C., 3rd in Dallas, and finally claimed her first professional victory in Seattle. The win in Seattle was especially significant because it came on a wet track, a condition that demands maximum skill from a driver. Sarah showed absolute control of the car in difficult conditions, overtaking far more experienced rivals. "That girl is something special," a veteran driver commented after the race. "She has the natural instinct of the greats." As the months went by, Sarah earned respect in the paddock. Initially seen as a novelty, she was now recognized as a legitimate driver capable of fighting for victories. Sterling had also changed his perspective on many things. Working daily with Sarah and Arthur, he rediscovered the pure passion for motorsport, the one that existed before the obsession with status and money. "You know," he said one afternoon as they watched Sarah adjusting the engine of one of the cars, "I had forgotten how rewarding it is to work with people who truly love what they do." "Thomas always said that," Arthur replied. "The secret wasn't in the sophistication of the equipment, but in the passion of those who use it." Midway through the season, Sarah received an offer to race in a higher category with more powerful cars and greater media visibility. It was a professional growth opportunity, but it would mean leaving Sterling and Arthur. "What do you think?" she asked during a team meeting. "That you should accept," Sterling answered immediately. "But that would mean the end of our partnership." "Not necessarily. We can expand the team, participate in 2 categories simultaneously." "You would invest in a more expensive category." "For you and Arthur, I would. You taught me that racing isn't about money, it's about passion." The decision was made. They would expand their activities to participate in the Stock Pro Series, the main category in national motorsports. The preparations took 6 months. Sterling sold some personal belongings to finance the most ambitious operation, while Sarah dedicated herself to studying the regulations and specific techniques of the new category. Arthur, despite his advanced age, was more excited than ever. "I'll end my career in the Stock Pro Series," he said. "It's like a dream come true." The first year in the Stock Pro Series was a learning experience. Sarah managed some decent finishes, but she still needed to adapt to the more sophisticated cars and the extreme competitiveness of the category. It was during this period that she rediscovered her passion for mechanics. In her spare time, she continued working at the original garage, fixing neighborhood cars and developing new setups based on her father's notes. The Millers' auto shop had transformed. With the prize money from the races, Sarah bought modern equipment and hired 2 employees. But she kept the original spirit: honest service, fair price, quality work. "I'll never abandon this place," she told Arthur one afternoon, watching one of the employees install an engine. "This is where it all started. Thomas would be proud to see what you've done with the place. Sometimes I feel like he's here, you know, especially when I'm working on the Beetle." The blue Beetle, the one that had changed her life, remained stored in a special corner of the garage. Sarah kept it in perfect working condition as a symbol of everything she had achieved. Every now and then, she would take the car to a charity race or classic car event. It always caused a sensation, especially when people found out that that rusty Beetle had once beaten Crimson Sports and Apex Bulls. In the second year of the Stock Pro Series, Sarah finally found her rhythm. She scored 3 wins and finished the championship in 4th place overall, firmly establishing herself as one of the country's top drivers. Sterling, who at first was just a rich businessman playing at racing, had become one of the most respected team owners. His personal transformation was remarkable: less arrogant, more focused on the technical side, genuinely concerned about his team's well-being. Arthur, at 65, still worked with the energy of a young man. His experience combined with Sarah's technical innovations created a perfect synergy. It was in the 3rd year that something happened that would change everything again. Sarah was working on a Thursday afternoon at the garage when she received an unexpected phone call. "Hello, is this Sarah Miller?" asked an unfamiliar male voice. "Yes, who's speaking?" "My name is Joseph Miller. I'm Thomas's brother." Sarah almost dropped the phone. Her whole life, she had believed she had no family besides her father. "My father's brother, but he never mentioned having a brother." "It's a long story. Can I explain in person? I'm here in Chicago." "Where?" "At a hotel near the airport." "I came from Kentucky specifically to talk to you." 2 hours later, Sarah was in the lobby of a modest hotel, talking to a man in his 60s whose facial features looked very much like her father's. Joseph Miller told her a story she never could have imagined. "Thomas and I fell out over 20 years ago because of a family inheritance. Our parents left a small rural property in Kentucky, and we both wanted to sell it for different reasons." "What kind of reasons?" "I needed the money to pay off debts from a business that had gone wrong. Thomas wanted to use the money to invest in his auto shop here in Chicago. And what happened? We had a terrible fight. Harsh words were said on both sides. Thomas decided to give up his share of the inheritance and never spoke to me again." Joseph explained that he had tried to re-establish contact several times over the years, but Thomas always refused. "When I found out that he had left 5 years ago, I was really sorry I hadn't pushed harder for reconciliation." "How did you find out he had left?" "By chance, I saw a report about you on TV at a Stock Pro Series race. The reporter mentioned you were the daughter of Thomas Miller, a mechanic who died a few years ago." "Died?" Sarah's eyes widened. "Who said he died?" Joseph looked confused. "He didn't die?" "But the report—" "My father didn't die. He left 5 years ago, but he didn't die. At least, not as far as I know. So, he might still be alive?" "He might. Although," she hesitated, "a mechanic who knew him told me he was very sick when he left." Joseph was silent for a few seconds, processing the information. "Sarah, can I tell you something about the property in Kentucky?" "Sure. I was never able to sell it. To this day, it belongs to both of us, to him and to me. It's a small ranch, but well kept. It has a simple house and a garage out back." "A garage?" "Thomas built it in the 80s, when he still lived there. It's well equipped. It even has a hydraulic lift." And you think he might have gone back there? I don't know. But if he wanted a place to stay isolated, dealing with health problems, it would be the perfect place. Sarah felt her heart race. There was a possibility, however small, of finding her father again after 5 years. Would you take me there? Of course. That was exactly what I was hoping you'd ask. The following Saturday, Sarah cancelled all her commitments and travelled to Kentucky with Joseph. The property was in a small town in the countryside, about 200 miles from Atlanta. During the trip, Joseph told her more details about the family she had never known. Thomas's parents had been simple people who worked their whole lives on a small coffee farm. Thomas was the youngest son, always interested in mechanics, while Joseph took care of the rural business. "Your father was different since he was a kid," Joseph said. "He took apart anything with an engine. Tractors, motorcycles, generators. Our father even built a small garage for him to play in." "And why did he come to Chicago?" "He met your mother at a party here in the city. She was visiting some relatives. It was love at first sight. When they decided to get married, she didn't want to move to the countryside, so Thomas came to Chicago." The property was exactly as Joseph had described it, a simple 2-bedroom house surrounded by fruit trees and a small vegetable garden. Out back, a well-structured garage with organized tools and quality equipment. When they walked into the garage, Sarah caught her breath. There was a car covered with a tarp in the middle of the workshop. Joseph pulled off the tarp and revealed another Beetle, this one painted green and in impeccable condition. This was his favorite project, Joseph said. He worked on it for years whenever he came to visit. "When was the last time he was here?" "About 5 years ago. He arrived very thin, visibly ill. He said he needed some time to recover." "And then?" "He stayed for 3 months. He worked on this Beetle every morning, as if it were therapy. Then he left again, but said he'd come back." "Did he come back?" "I don't know. Since then, I only come here every now and then to check if everything's in order. But the house always looks the same." Sarah examined the garage carefully. The tools were organized exactly like the ones in the Chicago garage. There were technical designs scattered across the workbench, handwritten notes she immediately recognized as her father's handwriting. In a drawer, she found more documents about engine preparation, some projects she had never seen before. It was like discovering a technical treasure left especially for her. "Joseph, can I stay here tonight?" "Of course. The house is always ready to welcome someone." That night, alone in the house where her father had been born, Sarah felt a deep connection to her roots. She examined every corner of the property, every tool in the garage, every technical note. In the room that had been Thomas's as a boy, she found a wooden box hidden under the bed. Inside were old photos, letters from Sarah's mother from their courtship days, and a diary where he jotted down his thoughts during the last months he spent there. The diary entries were touching. March 2019. "I arrived here very weak, but determined to fight this illness. The doctor in Chicago didn't give me much time, but I can't leave without getting everything organized for Sarah." April 2019. "I worked on the Green Beetle today. It's amazing how mechanics still calms me down. Every adjustment to the engine is like a prayer. Every polished part is a good memory." May 2019. "Joseph came to visit me today. We finally made peace after all these years. He understands that I need to sort out my situation before returning to Chicago." June 2019. "I decided to try an alternative treatment that a local doctor recommended. I can't give up. Sarah still needs me." The entries stopped abruptly in July 2019. There was no indication of what happened afterward. The next morning, Joseph showed up early. "Find anything?" "I found his diary. He stayed here until July 2019, trying to get treatment for a serious illness." "And then?" "I don't know." The entries stop abruptly. Joseph looked thoughtful. "There's a doctor in town who runs an alternative medicine clinic. Your father consulted him several times. Can we talk to him? We can try." The doctor, Dr. David Taylor, was an elderly man with white hair who treated patients at a small clinic in the town center. When Joseph explained the reason for their visit, he clearly looked uncomfortable. "Thomas Miller was my patient. I can't break patient confidentiality." "Doctor," said Sarah, I'm his daughter. I'm just trying to find out if he's still alive and where I can find him." Dr. David looked her over carefully, as if assessing whether he could trust her. "I can only say that Thomas underwent an experimental treatment here for a type of cancer that conventional doctors considered terminal. Did it work? It worked better than any of us expected. Within 6 months, the tumors had practically disappeared. And where is he now? I don't know. After he was discharged, he said he had family matters to take care of. I never heard from him again." Sarah felt a mix of relief and frustration. Relief knowing her father had recovered from the illness. Frustration at still not knowing where he was. "Doctor, is there anything else you can tell me?" Dr. David hesitated before answering. "He left a letter addressed to you in case you ever came looking for him." "A letter?" "It's been in my safe for over 4 years. Thomas asked me to hand it over only if you came here in person." He left the room and returned a few minutes later with a yellowish envelope. "This letter is yours." With trembling hands, Sarah opened the envelope. The letter was written in her father's familiar handwriting. "My dear daughter, if you're reading this, it means you found me or at least got close. I hope it wasn't too hard. I need to explain why I left so abruptly. In 2019, I found out I had advanced stage cancer. The doctors in Chicago gave me just a few months to live. I could have told you, but I didn't want you to go through the pain of watching me waste away. I decided to come to Kentucky to try an alternative treatment, and if it didn't work, to pass peacefully in the place I was born. But the treatment worked better than I expected. In a few months I was cured. The problem is, during this time of reflection, I realized I made serious mistakes as a father. I was emotionally absent, too focused on work, and I never taught you about your mother's or father's family. I decided to use the extra time life gave me to fix these mistakes. I traveled to several cities looking for your relatives on your mother's side, collecting stories, photos, and documents you should know about. I also worked as a volunteer mechanic in several underserved communities, teaching the trade to young people who had no opportunities. It was my way of giving back to life for the second chance I received. If you've come this far, it means you've become the strong, independent woman I always knew you would be. The Blue Beetle and all the knowledge I left you were just tools. The most important thing was always your determination. Now I'm ready to come back, if you'll have me. I live in a small town in Florida, where I work at a community garage. The address is on the back of this letter, but I want you to know, if you decide it's better for me to stay away, I'll respect your decision. You don't owe me anything. I'm the one who owes you an explanation for all these years of absence. With all my love, Dad. On the back of the letter was an address in Key Largo on the coast of Florida. Sarah read the letter 3 times before she could stop crying. Her father was alive, he was well, and he had spent the last 5 years trying to become a better person to earn her forgiveness. "I'm going to Florida," she said to Joseph. "Do you want me to come along?" "No. This meeting has to be just between the 2 of us." "And how long will you stay there?" "I don't know, maybe a few days, maybe a few weeks. I need to talk to him a lot." Joseph understood. He offered to take care of the property and the Green Beetle while she traveled. "Take the Green Beetle," he suggested. "Thomas would be happy to know you used it to go find him." Sarah spent the next day preparing the Green Beetle for the trip. The car was in perfect condition, with all the technical modifications characteristic of her father's work. Before leaving, she called Sterling, explaining she needed to be away for an indefinite time. "Family issues," she said, without going into details. "Do you need anything? Money, legal support, anything at all?" "No, thank you. Just ask Arthur to take care of the cars. I'll be back as soon as I can." The next morning she set off for Florida, driving the Green Beetle. It was a long trip, over 600 miles, but she wanted to take the journey slowly, thinking about everything she would say to her father after 5 years of separation. During the trip, she stopped in several small towns where she imagined he might have worked as a volunteer mechanic. In some, people remembered a mechanic from Chicago who had taught advanced techniques for free. He was a very simple man, a young man in a town along the way told her. But he knew everything about engines. He set up a small school garage here that's still running. How long was he here? About 6 months. Then he said he had to keep traveling, but that he might come back one day. Each testimony confirmed what was written in the letter. Thomas had spent the last few years helping underprivileged communities, using his technical knowledge to do good. When he finally arrived in Key Largo, it was already late afternoon. The address in the letter led to a small garage on a residential street, away from the tourist area. The sign out front read, "Community Garage, free repairs for those who can't pay." Sarah parked the green Beetle out front and watched the activity. There were a few young people working under the supervision of a man with his back to her, explaining how to change the oil in a compact car. When the man turned around, she recognized him immediately. It was Thomas, thinner, with completely white hair, but unmistakably her father. He saw her at the same instant. He stood frozen for a few seconds, then began walking slowly toward her. "Sarah?" he asked, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "Hi, Dad," she replied simply. They hugged right there on the sidewalk while the young people at the garage watched, not understanding what was happening. "How did you find me?" Thomas asked, still holding her. "It's a long story. Can we talk?" "Sure, let's go home. It's nearby." "Let's." The house was simple, 2 rooms on a quiet street. Thomas made some coffee and the two sat on a small porch to talk. "I need to start by apologizing," he said, "for leaving without any explanation, for being away so long, for—" "Dad," Sarah interrupted, "I read your letter. I understand why you left." "You understand?" "I don't agree with the method, but I understand the reasons." Thomas took a deep breath, visibly relieved. "How did you find out about Joseph's garage?" "Your brother contacted me. He saw a report about my races on TV." "Your races?" His eyes widened. "You're racing?" "I've been a professional stock Pro Series driver for 3 years." Thomas was silent for a few seconds, processing the information. "With which car?" "With a Swift hatch I prepared using your notes. And before that, I won a race in Aspen with the Blue Beetle." "The Blue Beetle? You figured out the modifications?" "I figured everything out. The modifications, your past as a tuner, the projects you left documented. Even Sterling Harrington, who humiliated me at that first race." "Sterling? You know Sterling?" "I know him and I work for him. He owns the team I drive for." Thomas shook his head in disbelief. "Life is full of coincidences, or connections we don't notice at the right time." They talked until late into the night. Thomas wanted to know every detail of her career in racing, and she wanted to understand exactly what he had done during the 5 years he was gone. "I worked in 17 different cities," he said. "In each place I set up a small garage school, taught basic mechanics to underprivileged youth, left some equipment as a gift and moved on to the next destination. Why didn't you come home?" "Because I needed to prove to myself that I could be useful in ways other than making money. During your childhood, I was obsessed with work, thinking that being a good provider was enough to be a good father. You were a good father. I was an absent father who left a motherless daughter to raise herself while I hid behind my work." Sarah realized that this guilt had tormented her father all these years. "Dad, can I tell you what I learned about you after I discovered your past?" "Sure." "You were much more of a father than you think. Every lesson about mechanics, every value of honesty you passed on to me, every example of how to treat people with respect, all of that shaped me as a person. But I never taught you about your family, about— So what? You taught me much more important things." She taught me how to work, how to be independent, how not to give up when things get tough. Thomas was moved by his daughter's words. "I was so afraid you'd hate me. I was hurt that you left without explanations. But hate you? Never. And now? What happens now? Now you come back to Chicago with me. Are you sure?" "I am. The shop is still running, but it needs the real Miller to be complete. And your races. They'll continue too. In fact, you can help me prepare the cars. Sterling would be thrilled to work with Thomas Miller again." The next morning, Thomas said goodbye to the young men working at the community garage. He had found an experienced local mechanic to continue the project, ensuring the work wouldn't be interrupted. "You've learned everything I had to teach you," he told the guys. "Now it's up to you." The trip back to Chicago was one of the most enriching experiences of Sarah's life. During the 2 days on the road, father and daughter talked about everything they had missed during their separation. Thomas told her about the people he had met, the places he had worked, the lessons he had learned about himself. Sarah talked about her races, the evolution of the shop, her plans for the future. "One thing intrigues me," Thomas said during a lunch stop. "How did you manage to get so much power out of the Blue Beetle just by following my notes?" "It wasn't just following them. I had to improvise some things, make adjustments." "What kind of adjustments?" "I changed the ignition system, adjusted the injection to work with high-octane fuel, modified the exhaust manifold." Thomas smiled proudly. "You didn't just follow my ideas, you improved them." "I learned from the best." When they arrived in Chicago at Miller's auto shop, Arthur was working alone on a Swift hatch engine. Seeing Thomas walk in, he dropped the tool he was holding and stood frozen. "Thomas Miller," he said slowly. "After 5 years." "Hello, old friend." The two hugged emotionally. Arthur had been more than a professional colleague. He was practically an older brother to Thomas. "I thought I'd never see you again," Arthur said, his voice choked. "I'm back to stay." "And how's your health?" "Completely recovered. Ready to work again." Arthur showed Thomas all the modifications that had been made to the shop: new equipment, expanded space, the area dedicated to race car preparation. "Sarah transformed this place," he explained, "but she always kept its original spirit." Sterling arrived at the shop in the late afternoon, still unaware that Thomas had returned. When he walked in and saw the two men talking, he was speechless for a few seconds. "Thomas, is it really you?" "Sterling, great to see you again." "But where have you been?" Thomas gave a condensed version of the past 5 years, omitting only the most personal details about the illness. "And now you're coming back to work with racing?" Sterling asked. "If you all want my help, yes." "Want it?" "Thomas, it would be an honor to work with you again." From that week on, the team gained a new technical dimension. Thomas brought knowledge accumulated over decades, while Sarah contributed more modern techniques she had developed. The combination worked perfectly. In the first few months after Thomas's return, the team won 4 consecutive victories in the Stock Pro Series. "It's like you two together are greater than the sum of the individual parts," Arthur commented during a race weekend. "That's how it should be between father and daughter," Thomas replied. Miller's auto shop also benefited. With Thomas handling the common services and Sarah focused on the competition side, they managed to expand their service and hire more employees. But perhaps the most significant change was in their relationship. The years of separation, paradoxically, brought them closer. Both had matured, learned to value what truly mattered. "You know what impresses me the most?" Sarah said one night after they closed the shop. "What?" "How you managed to spend 5 years away from here and still come back knowing exactly how to improve everything." "It's because I never stopped thinking about this place. In every city I worked, I'd see some new technique or different equipment and think, that would be useful at Sarah's shop." "Did you always think about me?" "Always. You were the reason I fought against the illness, the reason I wanted to become a better person." 6 months after Thomas's return, the team received a special invitation to take part in an exhibition race in Monaco, representing the country in an international competition. "It's the chance of a lifetime," said Sterling, "competing on the most famous circuit in the world." "But it's only an exhibition," Sarah reminded him. "It doesn't count for any championship. Doesn't matter. It's about honoring the country and showing our technical skill." Thomas grew thoughtful. "Sarah, do you want to go?" "I do, but only if you come along as head mechanic." "Me? I don't know if I'm ready for an international competition." "Dad, you've spent your whole life preparing for a moment like this. You just haven't realized it yet." The trip to Monaco was a unique experience. Thomas, who had never left the country, was amazed by the technical sophistication of the European teams. "They have equipment that costs more than our entire shop," he commented during practice. "But they don't have what we have," Sarah replied. "What do we have that they don't?" "Creativity, the ability to improvise, and most of all, genuine passion for what we do." The race in Monaco was run with standardized cars to level the playing field for all the participating countries. What set the teams apart was only the preparation and strategy. Sarah started in 12th place out of 24 international drivers. During practice, she had shown competitiveness, but she was still adapting to the challenging circuit. During the race, Thomas's experience as a mechanic was crucial. He guided Sarah over the radio, suggesting specific driving adjustments for each curve of the circuit. At the casino curve, brake 5 meters earlier and accelerate through the exit, he coached. At the Rascasse, use the whole track. Don't be afraid to get close to the barriers. With these instructions, Sarah consistently improved her pace. By the 20th lap, she was in 7th place. By the 40th, she had climbed to 5th. In the last 15 minutes of the race, something unexpected happened. Rain. The Monaco circuit, already challenging in dry conditions, became treacherous on a wet track. Several drivers made mistakes, and Sarah knew how to take advantage. With cautious but efficient driving, she managed to reach 3rd place. On the international podium, hearing the national anthem play in Monaco, she felt she had honored not only the country, but also the entire technical legacy her father had passed on to her. "How do you feel?" a journalist asked during the post-race interview. "Proud to represent the country and happy to have my father by my side as my mechanic." "Your father is Thomas Miller, correct? A legend in engine preparation." "Yes, and the best father a daughter could have." In the audience, Thomas watched the interview with tears in his eyes. He had spent 5 years feeling guilty about being an inadequate father. Now he saw that, in some mysterious way, he had managed to pass on to his daughter everything that truly mattered. The return home was triumphant. The 3rd place finish in Monaco was covered by the specialized press, and several international teams showed interest in hiring Leticia. "There's an offer from Formula E," Eduardo said during a team meeting. "Electric car category, lots of international prestige. And there's one from American IndyCar too," added Manuel. "Really good salary." Leticia looked at her father, seeking guidance. "What do you think?" "I think you should decide with your heart. Whatever choice you make, you'll have my full support. And if I decide to stay right here, keep racing in Brazil, I'll support that too. The important thing is that you're happy doing what you love." Leticia thought it over for a few days before making her decision. "I'm staying in Brazil," she announced during a team meeting. "I want to help develop national racing, train new drivers, show that we don't have to go abroad to have a meaningful career." Eduardo was surprised. "Are you sure? The international offers are very attractive." "I'm sure. My place is here, working with you, keeping alive the tradition my father taught me." Thomas smiled proudly. It was exactly the answer he had hoped for, but he needed it to come from her naturally. "And what will we do to keep growing here in Brazil?" asked Manuel. "I have some ideas," Leticia replied. "How about we create a racing school and engine prep program, teach underprivileged youth the same techniques my father developed?" "A school?" Eduardo became interested. "Yes. Use part of the team's resources to train new talent, democratize access to racing." The idea excited everyone. Over the following months, they developed an ambitious project, the Miller Racing School. The project included free courses in automotive mechanics, basic driving, and even engine preparation for young people interested in pursuing a career in the field. Thomas would be the lead mechanics instructor, Leticia would handle the driving side, and Eduardo would fund the initial structure. "It'll be my way of giving back everything racing gave me," Eduardo said during the project's launch. The school opened 6 months later in a renovated old factory in the industrial belt. For the first course, 200 young people from underprivileged communities enrolled. "It's moving to see so many young faces eager to learn," Thomas commented on the first day of classes. "And to think some of them might become future champions," Leticia added. Among the first students, a 16-year-old boy named Tyler stood out, showing natural talent in both mechanics and driving. "This kid reminds me of you at the same age," Thomas said to Leticia. "The same curiosity, the same ease in understanding how engines work. Do you think he has potential to race professionally? I think he has potential to do whatever he wants in life. He just needs an opportunity." Tyler became the first student to earn a full scholarship at the school. Within 2 years, he was already participating in amateur races with cars he prepared himself under Thomas's supervision. "It's so rewarding to see knowledge being passed on," said Manuel, who at 68 was still actively working at the school. "That's how it should be," Leticia agreed. "Each generation teaching the next, keeping the tradition alive." The Miller Racing School became a national benchmark. In 5 years, it trained over 1,000 young people in technical courses, and 23 of them landed jobs with professional teams. Tyler, the first scholarship student, even won a few national races and received an offer to race in Argentina. "Professor Leticia," he said on the day of his farewell, "how can I thank you for everything you've done for me?" Doing exactly what you're doing, seizing the opportunity, and carrying forward the values you learned here. And when I establish myself as a driver, I'm going to come back to teach other boys like me. That's the only kind of gratitude we want. Over the years, Sarah kept racing in the Stock Pro Series, scoring a few more wins and solidifying herself as one of the country's top drivers. But her greatest satisfaction didn't come from personal trophies. It came from the successes of the school's students. Sterling had also completely changed. From a businessman obsessed with status, he had become a true educator, investing not just money but time and energy into the community project. "You know," he said one afternoon, watching a group of mechanics working on engines, "this is the best investment I've ever made in my life." "Why?" Thomas asked. "Because for the first time, I'm investing in people, not things." Arthur, now 70, was still an endless source of technical knowledge. He had trained dozens of young mechanics, each one taking a bit of his experience into the job market. "Arthur," Sarah said one occasion, "have you ever thought about writing a book with everything you know?" "I have. But I prefer teaching in person. Anyone can read a book, but looking a student in the eye and seeing when they grasp something new, that's priceless." Miller's auto shop had also grown. With 3 locations in different parts of Chicago, it employed 22 people and handled everything from everyday cars to race car preparation. Thomas, now 60, split his time between the shop and the school. He had become a national authority on engine preparation, consulted by teams from all over the country. "Sometimes I think about how our lives changed since that race in Aspen," he said to Sarah one night after they closed the shop. "Do you think it changed for the better?" "Definitely. Not just professionally, but mostly personally. I learned that success isn't just measured by what you achieve, but by what you leave for the next generations." "And what do you think you're leaving?" "A daughter who turned out much better than I ever was. A school that will train hundreds of young professionals. And maybe most importantly, proof that family is built with presence, not presents." Sarah smiled, moved by her father's words. "Dad, can I confess something?" "Sure. For a long time, I thought you had abandoned me because I wasn't important enough to you. And now I know you left precisely because I was too important. You couldn't stand to see me suffering along with you." That was exactly it. And you know what else I discovered? What? That those 5 years apart, as painful as they were, made us grow in ways we might not have if we'd been together all the time. How so? I learned to be independent, to trust my abilities, not to give up when things get tough. And you learned that there are ways to be useful in the world beyond just working and making money. Thomas reflected on his daughter's words. "You're right. If I hadn't gone through those 5 years of reflection, I might never have had the idea for the school, never realized the importance of teaching other young people. And I might never have discovered I could be a race car driver, never built enough confidence to face prejudice. So, you don't regret anything?" "I only regret that we wasted time being too proud to talk about our feelings, but the rest was part of our growth." That night, for the first time in many years, Sarah and Thomas had dinner together in the small house behind the shop, talking about plans for the future. "There's something I want to propose to you," she said during dessert. "Go ahead." "How about we take a trip together, visit some of the cities where you worked these 5 years, meet the people you helped?" "You do that?" "Of course. I want to get to know this part of your story better." And I think it would be good for you too to see those people again. That would be wonderful. Then it's settled. Next vacation, we'll take that trip. The trip happened 3 months later. For 2 weeks, father and daughter visited 8 cities, where Thomas had worked as a volunteer mechanic. In every place they were welcomed with immense warmth. Thomas had left deep marks on many people's lives, teaching not just mechanics, but above all, values of hard work and honesty. Mr. Thomas changed my son's life, a woman in a small town told them. Today he has his own shop and employs 4 people. And it all started with the free classes he gave here in the community, added another resident. For Sarah, it was a chance to see a side of her father she had never witnessed, the social educator, the man who genuinely cared about the well-being of underprivileged communities. Dad, how many people do you think you taught in those 5 years? Directly? About 300, maybe 400. And indirectly? Considering that each person you taught probably taught others? Thomas had never thought about that. I don't know. Maybe around 2,000. Or more. You created a network of knowledge that keeps spreading indefinitely. Just like we're doing now with the school in Chicago. Exactly. That's how you change the world. One person at a time, one community at a time. During the trip, they also visited the property in Kentucky, where Thomas had spent the months recovering from his illness. Joseph, now 65 years old, kept the place immaculate. The green Beetle was still in the garage out back, running perfectly. "This car has been waiting for you," Joseph said to Sarah. "Thomas always said that one day you would come to pick it up. Can I take it to Chicago?" Of course. It was made to be driven, not to sit still. Sarah tested the green Beetle and was impressed. It had different technical features than the blue Beetle, but the same quality of preparation. "Dad, why did you make 2 such similar cars? The blue one was for you to use in the present. The green one was for the future, when you had more experience and wanted to try more advanced setups." "More advanced how?" "The green one has a turbo. It puts out almost 200 horsepower. 200 horsepower in a Beetle, 200 controlled horsepower. Everything was calculated to maintain safety and reliability. Back in Chicago with the green Beetle, Sarah decided to use it occasionally in some special races, always causing a sensation with its unexpected performance. Sterling was fascinated by the technical innovations in the second Beetle. "Thomas, you should patent some of these solutions." "What for?" replied Thomas. "I'd rather they be used freely by anyone who wants to learn. But you could make a lot of money with those patents." "Sterling, at 60 years old, I've discovered that money isn't the measure of success. Success is seeing young people like Tyler achieve their dreams using knowledge that I helped pass on." Sterling, who had spent decades obsessed with profits and status, finally understood what Thomas meant. 2 years after the trip through the countryside, something happened that permanently cemented the Miller family's legacy in American racing. Tyler, the school's first student, won the National Junior Formula Championship, the entry-level category for young drivers. At the celebration party, he made a point of calling Thomas and Sarah up to the podium. "None of this would be possible without your teachings," he said, emotional. "You didn't just teach me mechanics and driving. You taught me to believe that dreams can come true when you work hard for them." Tyler's speech was broadcast live on television and echoed across the country. The Miller Racing School received dozens of requests to open branches in other states. "I think it's time we expand nationwide," said Sterling Harrington during a meeting. "We have the demand and the resources for it. But we can't lose the quality of teaching," Sarah Miller warned. "I'd rather have fewer well-trained students than many poorly prepared ones." "I fully agree," said Thomas Miller. "We'll grow slowly, ensuring each new unit maintains the same standards as the original school." The expansion took 3 years, but it was done with great care. 5 new units were opened in major U.S. cities, each personally overseen by Thomas or Sarah. Arthur Sullivan, even at 73, still traveled regularly to supervise the technical side of the new schools. "This old man doesn't stop," Sterling Harrington joked. "He has more energy than a 40-year-old. "That's because he's found his purpose," Sarah replied. When you do what you love and see the positive impact you're making, age doesn't matter anymore. In 10 years of operation, the Miller School Network trained over 5,000 young professionals. Dozens became drivers, hundreds became specialized mechanics, and all carried forward the values of honest work and technical dedication. Sarah, now 38, still raced occasionally, but devoted more time to managing the schools and developing new teaching methods. Thomas, at 70, remained active as the lead instructor, but was already thinking about grooming successors for his responsibilities. "Dad," Sarah said one afternoon, "have you ever thought about retiring?" "I think about slowing down, but retiring completely? Never. As long as I have my health and energy, I'll keep teaching." "And what if one day you can't work anymore?" "Then I'll rest easy, knowing I've left a solid legacy. You, the schools, the thousands of young people who've come through here, all of it will keep going long after I'm gone." "Don't talk like that." "Sarah, I'm 70 years old, and I've already lived much longer than I imagined when I found out about the cancer 15 years ago. Every extra day is a gift. Even so, I'd rather not think about it." "That's natural, but I want you to know I'm at peace. I became the father you deserved. I helped shape a new generation of professionals, and I proved to myself that it's possible to change and improve at any age." That conversation marked a new phase in their relationship. Sarah began to treasure every moment with her father even more, knowing that time is the most precious thing we have. They started a ritual. Every Friday, after closing the shop, they would have dinner together and talk about everything: work, family, dreams, memories. "You know what I'm most proud of?" Thomas asked one of those Fridays. "What?" "That I raised a daughter who's a better person than I ever was." "Dad, you're being too hard on yourself." "No, it's true. You have all my technical skills, but none of my personal flaws. You're more generous, more patient, wiser in human relationships. If I'm like that, it's because I learned from your mistakes and your achievements." "Exactly. That's how it should be. Each generation learning from the one before and becoming a little better." That same year, Sarah received a special honor. She was named Personality of the Year by the National Racing Association, not just for her achievements as a driver, but mainly for her contribution to training new professionals. At the awards ceremony, she made sure to dedicate the trophy to her father. "This award isn't just mine," she said in her speech. "It belongs to everyone who helped make our educational project possible, especially my father, Thomas Miller, who taught me that true success is measured by the good you do for others." Thomas, in the audience, had tears in his eyes. At 70 years old, he finally felt fulfilled as a father. After the ceremony, Sterling Harrington approached them. "You know you're my family, don't you?" he said, emotional. "I never got married, never had kids. You're the most precious thing I have in life. And you're our older brother," Sarah replied, hugging him. "A brother who learned to be a better person and helped us become better too." "Without you," added Thomas, "none of this would have been possible. Thank you for believing in us." Arthur Sullivan, who was watching the scene just a few feet away, smiled contentedly. At 75, he could see that his life had been well lived. He had helped shape 2 generations of exceptional mechanics and contributed to a project that impacted thousands of lives. "What are you thinking about, old friend?" asked Thomas, noticing Arthur's smile. "I'm thinking we made it. We created something that will last long beyond our lifetimes." "We really did. And the best part is, we did it together, like a family." End of story. So what did you think of this story of overcoming and family? Did you get emotional along with Sarah and Thomas? Leave in the comments which part touched you the most, and if you have a similar experience of family reconciliation to share. If this story sparked any special memory or made you reflect on the importance of family, we want to know. Thank you so much for sticking with us until the end.